Good morning, Michael Hudson here. I was struck by some conversations I had on the ride home from the gym this morning and after my writing session I do every morning. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you on what I think is something really powerful that we often overlook. And that's the value of deciding. And maybe we could call it the power or the clarity or the peace of mind. Because here's the reality that came up in these two conversations I had, very quick conversations where someone reached out to ask me a question about something they were wrestling with. And the impact probably was more on me than it was on them. Because those of us who do these kinds of things that we do in our businesses, those of us who are coaches, speakers, consultants, we spend a lot of time helping other people, but sometimes we struggle to help ourselves. Sometimes it's just a lot easier to tell someone else what they should do and to coach them through that decision-making process than it is to get inside of our own head and figure out how we're going to do it ourselves. Well, these two conversations led me to a realization, and there was some work done before it that probably set the stage for this, and I think that's often the case for most of us. But they led me to realize there was a decision I've been wrestling with, and I should actually be more honest than that. I haven't been wrestling with it. In fact, I've been ignoring it. I've been treating it as a non-decision, which really means I was treating it as a decision I had already made and wasn't going to revisit. But the truth is, it's a decision I needed to revisit. So I'm sharing this via this Facebook Live today to ask you the question of what's that thing that you've decided or thought you need to do or want to do or are going to do, that maybe it's time to take a step back and make the harder decision of deciding whether or not it actually fits. We can get really caught up and excited in our brains about something we're going to do and find ourselves so far into it that we don't really know whether it makes sense anymore. We're into that process where we're creating it, we're crafting it, we're structuring it, we're figuring it out, and we're committed to the vision because we believe it's right for us. But we're not taking that step in our mind to say, does it really still make sense? Some of you who have heard from me before know that one of my favorite strategic questions is, if you weren't already doing this, would you start? Well, if you subject something to that question, it forces you to look at it differently. It's kind of as though you take a step back and take a different perspective and look over here instead of staying so focused here. Well, a lot of times when that happens, what you'll realize is you've gotten so far into the process, so far into the doing, so far into the committing and sharing that you think you can't make the decision to stop doing it. Now, I've spent much of the past 35 years helping organizations with strategy. And one of the things we do in every strategic planning conversation is address that question multiple times. If you weren't already doing this, would you begin? And if the answer is no, then we figure out how to stop doing it as soon as we can. I think for those of us who work in the expert space, coaches, speakers, consultants, content creators, authors, sometimes we need to step back earlier in our process and say, okay, I made that decision. I mapped that plan. Does it still make sense? Should I actually pursue that? Or am I at the point where I should say, you know what? That made sense then. It doesn't make sense now. And I want to challenge you today to think about that. Maybe there's something you're working on that you believe this is where I need to go. And if you were to be asked that question by someone else, if you weren't already doing this, would you start? You would say no. Or maybe a better way to think about it, if you were working with someone and they were telling you what they were thinking and they were at the same state you're at in whatever this thing is you're working on, you would ask them that question, and you might even try to encourage them to think through it until they realized this no longer makes sense. You see, we can waste a lot of time, effort, and energy not making those tough decisions. But the reason I'm doing this today is not just to encourage you to think about that, but to remind you of something that is really, really important. What happens when you make that decision? These two conversations I had this morning piggybacked on some writing I had done earlier in the day and on some conversations and thinking I've been having across the past few weeks about something I had committed in my mind that I needed to do this, and this is the path I wanted to take. And I found that after having these conversations, doing this writing, engaging with some colleagues, kicking around, I realized, you know what? That's not the path. It's not the thing I should do right now. It doesn't fit. It doesn't align with my business vision and strategy at this moment. Now, here's the difficult thing behind that. It was difficult to make a decision to not do it now because it is, in fact, part of my longer-term business vision. It is part of the destination I'm pursuing where I want to take my business. But one of the things we always need to consider is this the right moment? Am I ready? Does this make sense now? So I wanted to share this with you today and challenge you to think through the things you're committing your time, effort, and energy to today. Are there things that you're focused on and you're putting your effort and energy into that in reality, they're not the next right step? They're a step that comes down the road. There's something that matters that fits in your business vision that you should be working towards, but maybe the foundation is not in place. In fact, that's what hit me yesterday that led to making this decision this morning. The fact that I'm a little bit like a carpenter who's trying to build this beautiful house with this vision of this thing I want to do, but I haven't built the foundation. And if I move forward and build a house, what I'm going to create is a foundation that is not sustainable. And that makes no sense. Hello, Diana. Thank you for that comment. I really appreciate that. The reality is that we can get so into what we love to do. And for many of us in the expert space, that's creating. A lot of us would just as soon go head down, spend all of our time working on our own, and then putting it out there and waiting for people to consume it and hoping they will love it and benefit from it, and that we'll be able to serve them with what we're sharing. But we need to think carefully about what is the path. What are the steps that get us there? What specific things do we need to do along the way to build the foundation that will enable us to create the building, the house, the office, whatever you want to call it, whatever vision you have of what that thing looks like, in a way that lets it have the impact that we're supposed to make it have. And too often in my work with people, coaching them over the past several years, I've seen people sort of run off in a direction because they know it's a place they want to be and they're not ready. Well, when that happens to you, it's really tough for you to own that and acknowledge that to yourself, particularly if you're someone who coaches other people. If you're someone who stands in front of rooms and shares messages that are intended to drive people to take action and change something, and then you wake up and realize, you know what? I'm not thinking this fully through. I've committed to something here that I didn't build the foundation for, and it's not time to launch. So the takeaway here for you is this. What is the next right step? What is the next right step? And that step should be, what is the step that builds out that foundation or puts the first floor on that building or puts the standing framing up? Now, for those of you who aren't carpentry related and didn't spend any time in that business as I did, think about it as, maybe you're making a dish for dinner, or maybe you're baking a cake, or maybe you're planning a party or an event. There are steps and processes that we all need to follow in anything we do. But those of us who tend to love to think big, and I'm someone who loves to think big, we tend to get really excited about the vision. We get really excited about the changes and the transformations we know we can make for people when we get to spend time with them in the way we're envisioning, when we get to serve them in the way we think we can serve them right now with this big idea. But don't forget, the only way you open the door to doing that is by building the firm foundation. So this kind of ties to a post I shared here on Facebook a couple days ago, maybe it was yesterday, I don't recall, about how you have to, when you think big, you have to go small in order to get there. So I invite you, I encourage you, I beg you, think big about the impact you can create. And then go small about the daily step-by-step actions you need to take to get you there. And if you've overcommitted your energy, your time, your resources, your thinking to looking at that big thing and trying to get there immediately, and you're struggling with that, you're wrestling with it, you're debating it, you're concerned, that voice in your head is telling you it won't work, then there's a good chance it may be time to make a different decision. It may be time to step back and to say, you know what? The decision I need to make right now is that is not something I do today. That is not something I do tomorrow or next week or next month. It is part of my vision. It is something I'm driving toward. But right now, I need to dive in and do the work to build the foundation so that when I do that big thing, it has the impact that I'm here to make it have. Okay, let me wrap it up for there. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you found value in this. And I hope that you'll recognize the value of deciding and that you'll take the time. Now, before I disappear, just want to comment, Diana, I see that you posted here, yes, so many don't do that or want to do that and they just jump in. Jumping in can be good providing you have the basics to swim. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Diana. I think that's kind of the key essence of the message, right? Make sure we're ready. Make sure it's the right time. We have to think through that and make sure we're working on the right thing at the right moment. So take the next right step. Have the guts to confront the thing that you may be holding on to that is actually getting in your way, and maybe you're not even seeing it. Get the value of deciding not to do it now. And maybe in some cases deciding not to do it at all, because that's going to help you move the ball further down the field towards the goal that you're pursuing. And that's all that I want for any of you. Again, thanks for joining. Would love it if you'd post a comment and share a situation of something you've decided you don't need to do. Maybe you're doing it now. Maybe you did it in the past. And certainly welcome any pushback on these ideas. I'm Michael Hudson. Thanks for joining me today.